What's up everyone, it's Nerd Fans Die Feminine from Holistic Songwriting. Welcome to another video of our Top 100 series where we talk about the biggest songs in the world according to Rolling Stone magazine and what we can learn from them. Today we're talking about a song from Los Ramones. This one's called Blitzkrieg Bob, and it's number 92 on the Top 100 list. So let's get straight into it. Today we're going to talk about melodic chords, because that's really what the song is known for the most, is that iconic riff right at the start in the intro, right? That kind of keeps going throughout almost all of the song. So let's get started with a little bit of research I did on Wikipedia, and just some interesting tidbits I managed to uncover about the song. First of which being the singer saying he came up with the chant, like the hey, ho, let's go, that really famous bit, while walking home from the grocery store carrying a bag of groceries, and it was based on the line, "Hi Ho's nipped her toes," from the song Walking the Dog by Rufus Thomas. So I've actually managed to uncover that piece of music there. I'm not sure that's the actual lyrics, but let's listen to that real quick together. I think he's actually singing high hopes, tips and toes, but I might be wrong. Anyways, the other thing that I thought was really interesting about this is that the song was originally played at a very fast tempo, roughly 177 BPM. When the band performed the song live, they started to play it at even faster tempos, gradually increasing the speed throughout their career. At the band's final show, they played the song at an extremely fast tempo, well above 200 BPM. So there you go. So let's talk about three core emotions that the song makes us feel, and then later on maybe we can connect those to certain specific techniques being used by the band. So what are three emotions that this song makes you feel? Take a couple of seconds, stop the video now, come back to me when you have your answers. All right, before you say anything, there's three types of people in the world, okay? Those who can count and those who can't, okay? So bear that in mind. And I know that point number two isn't really an emotion. Whatever isn't really an emotion. However, I could have written something like indifference, but I think the word whatever also has a sense of a passive aggressiveness in a way. You know what I mean? Like if it was just indifference, that sounds almost like bored or not really caring at all. But whatever has a certain anger towards the issue that I wanted to address here. So, you know, bear with me on this one is all I'm saying. Okay, so we're going to start with the drums and see what those do in the song. Throughout the entire song almost, the kick and snare play the same thing over and over again. It's just the right hand that changes. So throughout most of the song, it's on the hi-hat, on an open hi-hat. Then in some points it goes to the toms, that's the hey ho let's go part. And then sometimes it goes to the ride when we go to the chorus. But what can we learn from this groove, and how can we find our emotions within this groove? Well, I think that double kick there on the 3 and the 3 and, that has a certain energetic vibe. You know, if it was just doom ga doom ga doom ga doom ga at that high tempo, still it wouldn't have that same vibe as doom ga doom ga doom ga doom ga. So then we have a backbeat on the 2 and 4, which gives us like this very fast feeling kind of groove. They could have placed the backbeat on the 3, but no, they decided to go for a 2 and 4, which gives it that very driven feel. And then obviously we have the open hi-hat in 8th notes. So open hi-hat in general is something I typically, when I write for my own music, typically especially at faster tempos, I'll typically have that play in quarter notes, just because there's so much wash going on. And once you go to higher subdivisions on the hi-hat, on an open hi-hat that is, just open hi-hat, closed hi-hat's really not a problem. But if you go to an open hi-hat, there's so much wash that you can't really tell the attack of the stick anymore. And it results in a kind of, it's a very undefined, unfocused sound. So typically when I go up to above a certain tempos, I typically will have the hi-hat playing in quarter notes if it's an open hi-hat. And only go back to 8th notes if I'm at a very slow tempo, so I can still hear those defined hits. But here, the drummer didn't choose to do that. The drummer actually goes for an open hi-hat in 8th notes at those very fast tempos, which just results in this very chaotic sound. again, that's kind of what contributes to the energy though. And also, on the second bar, this is really interesting because it's very unusual. Typically, if you play a crash somewhere in a 4-bar section, it's going to be on the one of the first bar, right? Well, not in this case. Here, the drummer plays on the one of the second bar. So this is a 2-bar phrase essentially, right? It's the da da ga da ga da ga da da ga da ga. And instead of placing on the da da ga da ga da ga da da da, he places on the da da ga da ga da ga da da ga da 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 ga da ga da ga da da ga da da. So he places it on the one of the second bar. So that's kind of unusual. And I think the song, the way it starts, I'm maybe just so used to the fact that I like hearing a crash on the one. I think the song starts off with a jolt, right? Because the guitars kick in, the drums, everything kicks in at the same time. I think that moment would have been even stronger if he'd placed a crash on that one. But instead, there's no crash on the one, only a crash on the one of the second bar. So unusual, just something to keep in mind. And it's something I would label as whatever. It's just, we're gonna do it this way. Just because you say so doesn't mean we have to do it that way. And kind of the same thing goes for the hi-hat, right? Like the proper technique would have been to play it in sub 4, but that's not what they're doing. So again, there's a little vibe of like, indifference, I don't care, fuck you. It's that kind of vibe that the drums are getting across. So as I said previously, the drum groove for the snare and kick drum are the same throughout pretty much the entire song. There's a little bit of variations as he's playing. Sometimes he's playing a double kick on the one and the one and as well. So it's a du-du-ga instead of just du-ga du-du-ga. But it's pretty much this throughout the entire song. And those variations just happen naturally throughout the song. So it's not tied to any certain section. It's not tied to any moment in the song. It's just whatever the drummer is playing, It's almost improvised over this kind of simple groove. But as you can see, the only thing that's really changing from section to section is the right hand. So at the top here, we have the verses with the open hi-hat. And at the bottom, you can see the tom section where they're playing the hey, ho, let's go part. And there's also the chorus where he switches the right hand to the ride. And I think we should probably listen to that first before we move on so you can hear. Listen to what stays the same in those 3 grooves and how just the right hand changes. Listen to this. Hear that? All right. Let's talk about the guitar and bass. And I think it does make sense to talk about them together because they're essentially playing the same thing. Obviously, the guitar plays power chords, the bass only plays single notes, but they just play the root notes of whatever the guitar is playing. So let's talk about them together. The rhythms are the same. Pretty much everything else is the same here as well. For the main riff, there's really 2 lines. There's an A line and a B line. The A line is the da da ga da ga da ga da da ga da, and the B line is da da ga da 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 da. Okay, and in the final song we have a structure of A A A B. So we hear the A line 3 times, and then we hear the B line. Okay. Now, in terms of chords, this really couldn't be simpler. This is a very straightforward 1 4 5 in the A line, and in the B line it's a 1 4 1. What makes this energetic? I think the main thing is the power chords. Power chords always have a nice energy. It's obviously very, very important. The tempo. It's these syncopations here in the second bar. That little syncopation is really, really important. If it was that wouldn't have been as strong, right? But that syncopation is really, really powerful. In the B line, we have these 2 pickup phrases almost. If we look at this rhythmically, it almost has the same function as a dominant in harmony. Rhythmically, what we have here is a dominant to the next chord. It's the da da ga da da ga da da ga da ga da ga. So those 2 eighth notes have a strong pull towards the next chord, which also gives it a lot of energy. In the whatever camp, there's the bad voice leading of the guitars. Now this is not uncommon for rock guitar because on guitar we tend to think in shapes that we just move about on the fretboard. On the piano, when we think about voicings, we try to play ergonomically, so we want to move as little as possible. And so we have to think about voicings a lot more, whereas on guitar, we just move that about. But I still want to mention it here because I think they could have chosen a melody, and this is what it is. That's why we talk about melodic chords here. They could have chosen a melody that would have sounded a little bit more connected, but they went for something where they jumped from the 1 to the 4, and then to the 5, and then back to the 1, and then to the 4, and then to the 1, which is huge jumps all over the place. They could have gone for something which was smaller jumps, essentially, or stepwise motion to just the next chord in the scale. But they didn't do that. So it has this disconnected feel, which to me has a sense of whatever. Now, before we move on, I'm going to play you the riff as it is on the record and then the live version of that track. So you can hear the much faster version first and foremost. And you can also hear that in the live version, the guitarist is playing the riff a little bit differently. He's adding in some more pauses to make it a little bit easier on his right hand. Because, and this is another thing that I think is quite important here, because it also gives it this energetic whatever vibe, is that the guitarist is playing all of these power chords with downstrokes only. So instead of playing with like the alternate picking, which is how you typically learn how to properly play guitar, he's playing everything downstrokes, which gives every note much more impact. And again, this is the perfect example for an energetic whatever kind of emotion. Listen to this. Let's move on to the chorus, or whatever you want to call it, the hey ho, let's go, shoot 'em in the back now section. So here we have a chord progression of 4-4-4-4, 1-1-4-1, 4-4-4-4, 2-2-4-5. So it's the first and only time in the entire song that we hear a different chord other than the 1, 4, and 5. So harmonically, pretty straightforward. Everything we've already said about the voice leadings not really making a lot of sense still totally applies here. Lastly, let's talk about the vocals. First of all, here's the hey ho, let's go part. I don't really have anything to say about it, except for if you have a toneless section where it's just toneless shouting in your song, then really all that becomes important is that rhythm, right? Now, I think that's really an undervalued technique. I think there's not enough toneless shouting in modern music today. We have rapping, obviously, but then even rapping is becoming more and more melodic and has become more and more melodic over the last couple of years. So I wonder why not more people use this kind of technique, because it is a cool tool in our arsenal. So yeah, I hope to see more people use a little bit more outside the box techniques like this one. Lastly, let's talk about the vocals in the verses. Now, here's what the vocals are singing essentially. There's a couple of things I want to call your attention to. First of all is that this is essentially a one-note melody, right? All of these notes pretty much revolve around that E, which is the 5th degree in our key, in A major. So the 5th is known as a very bland but also powerful, resonant kind of interval. And it's a very typical note to use for rock bands who are used to that sound of the root and 5th, of that power chord sound. So it's a very typical note for rock bands. We hear it, being used by Tool, for example, all the time. Linkin Park would be another good example. So very, very common note. So nothing too weird going on there. Again, it's a one-note melody, so the focus is on the rhythm more than it is on the color of the melody. And it's very fast. So we have eighth notes, and at those high tempos of 200 BPM plus, that becomes a very fast and energetic melody. And that stays the same throughout pretty much the entire song, except when we move to the chorus, because here the notes do change. What's interesting about this first and foremost is that it almost doesn't feel like a chorus, and I think the main reason for that is that the main vocals don't hit a note higher than the E that we heard in the verse. Typically when we write a song, we want to place our highest notes in the chorus, and here the singer places the highest notes in the verse. We do have an E in the chorus, but it's placed at the very end, and it doesn't feel like it's an integral part of that melody. If you look at what notes he's actually singing in the chorus, you'll quickly realize that he's actually just following the chords. He's literally singing the roots of all the chords. So he's singing a D, then he's moving down to a B, up to a D again, and then to an E. So he's literally just following exactly what the guitar and bass are playing. So what we have here harmonically could not be any simpler. This is literally pretty much the simplest it can get. The drums, obviously not playing any pitch. Bass and guitar are playing those chords, power chords, so not even a third. and the vocals are following that as well. So we have three instruments, vocals, bass, and guitar, all essentially playing that same melody. And that's why I think it's appropriate to title this video Melodic Chords. That's it. Thank you so much for watching. Please like, share, and subscribe. Take care and stay gefährlich.